Hey everyone, welcome back to Reading with Tatiana. Today I'm doing a booktube tag by Literary Low. I will tag her channel down below, and today's tag is the Midyear Freakout tag. I'm doing a tag video today because I have some friends visiting from Vancouver, and then after their trip here, I'm going back with them to Vancouver to spend some time with family and friends. So there will be a bit of a break between books, so I thought I would film and upload this while I'm away on vacation. I will also spread this tag along the booktube community, so I'm going to tag Kelly Reads a Lot, P English Literature, and Novel Opinions if you want to join in on this tag as well. The first question in this booktube tag is the best book you've read so far this year. So this is really hard to pick just one book, so I'm going to pick my top three. These books are books that I've read, and when I finished them, I was like, people have to read this book just to experience it. So the first one is a very recent read, is True Biz by Sarah Novick. And this book itself, I think if I didn't have a lot of exposure to the deaf community, it's still a solid book, but because it's my first time really reading in depth about what it's like to be deaf, this book was very eye-opening for me, and it really showed how ignorant I am as a hearing person. So this book is one of the best books I've read this year so far. The second of the best books I've read this year so far is Against the Loveless World by Susan Abuhara, and this book was just very eye-opening for me. It is a historical fiction set in Palestine and Iraq, and it was just eye-opening because it shows the other side of the war in Iraq, and it shows there isn't really any good guys or bad guys in the war. It's just people doing the best that they can or being motivated in different ways than what we're accustomed to. So this book was super eye-opening to me, and I think if you're interested in learning more about this region of the world, I highly recommend it. My third must-read so far in the first half of this year is Even After All This Time by Afshineh Latifi. And this is recommended by a friend of mine, and this book is a memoir, so it is a factual book of someone's life, and she talks about her and her family's experience on fleeing Iran and immigrating to America and that experience. This book was just very eye-opening for me as well, just to read about an immigrant's experience and their struggle, and a lot of it, I could relate to, even though I'm not an immigrant myself, but just all the cultural differences that you experience as an immigrant. So this book is also a must-read for me. The second question is the best sequel you've read this year. To be honest, I don't read too many series or trilogies or those kind of books. I read a lot of one-off books. But by chance, I did read the Ballads of the Songbird and Snake, which is actually a prequel to the Hunger Games trilogy from 10 years ago. But I would call this the sequel category just because it's written post the Hunger Games. However, the book is a prequel if you're going to read it. And this book, I gave it a 4 out of 5, I believe. And I was a Hunger Games fan when it came out a long time ago, so it's very nostalgic for me. And even though the book, when it released, had tons of mixed reviews from fans, for me, I really enjoyed it because it was the villain's President Snow's origin story, and I thought it was a really fun read. The only reason I docked it 1 star was there were parts of the book that drag. It's a very thick book, kind of like Harry Potter Goblet of Fire level, but overall I really enjoyed it, so if you have a chance to read it, I would recommend it as well. The third question is, what's the new release you haven't read yet but you want to? So for me, at my library, I have most of her books on hold, and I was starting at number 600. I think one of them is 100 and something, but most of them are still 200 or 300. So I would love to read any Colleen Hoover books. I have read none of her books. I see them everywhere on Booktube. My friends recommend it on Goodreads all the time, and people just love her books. So it's on my holds list at the library, and once I get it, I would definitely read and review it. And I'm kind of nervous because it's so hyped up that I'm worried it won't live up to my expectations. But just remind myself that I will read it as if I've heard nothing about it, and I hope it's a good read. The fourth question is, what is your most anticipated release for the second half of the year? To be honest, I'm not on Book Talk or Bookstagram. I only have my Booktube, where I really just do reviews on books I've read and some book tags here and there. So I'm not really up to date on new releases or upcoming releases. I don't really also follow any offers specifically. However, when I watched Literary Low's video for this, she said she was really excited to read Taylor Jenkins reads upcoming book called Carrie Soto is Back. So I guess I would add that to my list. because I love the Seven Husbands of Evelyn Tugel, so I don't doubt that this book will also be very juicy and dramatic, and it would just like suck me in. So I'm excited for this book when it comes out later this year. The next question is, what's your biggest disappointment so far this year? So I've had two one-star reads. The first one was The Department of Rare Books and Special Collections, and the second book was How to Lose Friends and Alien People. However, these two books I read with no expectations. The first book, The Department of Rare Books and Special Collections, was just at my library at the front, so I picked it on a whim. The second book, How to Lose Friends and Alienate People, it was at my boyfriend's parents' house in their basement, and I just picked it up on a whim because I didn't have a library card yet. So even though those two books were a one-star review, they weren't a disappointment. So the biggest disappointment for me this year so far is actually Lord of the Flies. And why Lord of the Flies was a disappointment for me was because it is a classic book, and I had read Animal Farm quite recently, and that book was a 5 out of 5. It was so amazing. So I had very high hopes for this classic, but after reading it, it just wasn't a 5 out of 5. It was actually a 3 out of 5. So that was my biggest disappointment. What was your biggest surprise this year? So my biggest surprise this year is They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera, which is a young adult novel. This book I actually only gave a 3 out of 5 because I felt there were too many extra characters and there wasn't a lot of character development and the story felt a bit rushed. However, this book was a big surprise for me in the sense that the world that Adam Silvera created, where you have this world where you're given a heads up that you're going to die and a countdown, and the idea of how people react to that in different ways, that concept really stuck with me after the book. And I was so excited to learn that there's a TV show in development about this book, and just to see that world more fleshed out. So that book was a really big surprise for me because after I finished it, I kept wondering and fantasizing about what it would be like to live in that world. Who is my new favorite author, debut author? So I was fortunate enough this year to read a lot of debut authors' books, which I think is always fun and exciting because I think it's just so amazing to be able to write and produce something. And so my favorite author this year so far is the current book I'm reading, Etaf Rum, which is her debut novel from back in 2019. And she is a Palestinian American writer, and I just love her writing. It's so beautiful. Like within the first chapter, I was roped in, and she actually was set to write her second novel to come out in 2021. However, I haven't seen anything that's come out yet. So Etaf Rum, if you or your publishers or your marketing team somehow magically sees the small Booktube video, please, I hope a new book is coming out because I'm already sad when I finish this book and I can't wait to read her next work. Next question is, what's your newest fictional crush? So when I think crush, I don't really think of a romantic crush because I feel like I'm past that in my life at this point in my 30s. But I think a fictional crush as in like someone that I think is a great role model for young women or young girls everywhere or young boys is Lucy Gray from The Ballad of Songbirds and Snake. She is not the protagonist because the protagonist is President Snow, but she is the love interest, the second protagonist, if that's a thing. And I just love it because she was very creative and passionate, and she was very resilient in the whole book, and she had a lot of care for people around her and her community. And her character was really a good example of lead by example, not just by preaching. So I really enjoyed Lucy Gray's character in The Ballads of Songbird and Snake. Who is my newest favorite character? So my newest favorite character is probably a tie. The first one is probably Nora from Book Lovers, which I just finished recently. And the second one is probably Tina Fey in her biography. I don't know if I can say Tina Fey as a favorite character because she's a real person, but I really enjoy Tina Fey and Nora in Book Lovers because they were both very quirky, very unapologetic. I loved their internal dialogue with how they saw the world and how they saw themselves in society. I thought it was very candid and very relatable. So they're both of my favorite characters this year so far just because I could relate to them a lot. Name a book that made you cry. I have two books. So the first one is The Tattooist of Auschwitz, which is not a memoir, but the author was able to interview the tattooist himself over a span of 3 years, and she took a few years to actually do her research and publish the book years later. And this book was just really I couldn't put it down. Like, I just feel so fortunate that the author was able to, Heather Morris, was able to by chance cross paths with the tattooist and write down his story. And it was just a very emotional book. And I can't believe that, like, Auschwitz was a thing. So I really recommend that book if you're able to read it. It is really heavy though. The second recommendation I have is, I mentioned it earlier, was my best book of the year, Against the Loveless World by Susan Abiara. It's just a great book as well to see the other side of the world, to see the other side of the war of Iraq. And the empathy it gives you for these people just really like touched me. So if you have a chance to read these two books, want a bit of a cry, I really recommend them. Now, the opposite of the spectrum is name a book that made you happy. So my two books I'm going to recommend is one I mentioned earlier, is Even After All This Time, by Afshineh Latifi. And this book made me happy because even though we hear a lot of struggles about her and her family's immigration to America, in the end, you know, because she wrote this book, we learned that she is a successful lawyer and she has this amazing life, and it just shows, you know, her resilience. So in the end, this book made me really happy just to see her family's progression in life. The second book that made me happy this year is Still Running by Vanessa Suze Goddard. This book may not make you happy if you're not a runner or into mindfulness or meditation. This book made me happy because at the end of it, it gave me permission to give myself more grace when it comes to my running journey. I have been struggling this past year with running, and it has been or was a passion of mine for a long time. So this book made me happy because in a way it was like a huge self-help book for me. Next question is, what is the most beautiful book you bought or received this year? So I don't really buy books unless it's for my book club. I usually get most of my books from the library, but one book that I did take, and this is probably not what you're going to expect, I really like this cover, is William Golding's Lord of the Flies. And the reason why I think this book cover is so beautiful is this is actually my boyfriend's dad's book, and it's his copy from high school. And I just love this cover because I feel like book covers nowadays aren't designed like this. I love the bold colors, which is a modern day design, but I just love the picture of this kid. And it's just very like retro, and I just really enjoy it. And you know, it's a book that's been well loved for decades. So yeah, this is my most beautiful book I've received this year. The final question is, what books do you need to read by the end of this year? So I am ashamed to admit that I have 373 books I want to read on my Goodreads, and it's going to keep growing because anytime I watch a booktube video and someone recommends a book or they describe a book that sounds really interesting, I'll add it to my Goodreads. And also when I go to a library, I don't always just go for my Goodreads. I will actually go to a new releases section, or I'll browse and I'll pick books that weren't even on my to-do list. So I would love to lower that number down from 373. But realistically, I know it's going to be ever growing. Maybe the rest of this year I'll just focus on books just from that list, but who knows? Thank you for watching till the end of my mid-year freakout tag. I will always appreciate if you can subscribe, if you enjoy what you're seeing, if you can give this video a thumbs up, and if you can leave a comment down below on what are some of your answers for this tag as well. I'll also link all the books that I have reviewed in the description down below, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.